what's going on, everybody? This is Alex once again with another episode of the EOT News Flash. This is episode 115, and of course, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope your holiday season was great, no matter what holiday you celebrate. I hope it was full of friends and family, maybe a little bit of magic, and then you got to ring in the new year with a bang as well. Now, of course, it is 2020, and I'm sure you all have seen from all different kinds of outlets best of lists, best movies of the year, best books of the year, best albums of the year, and those are all great and all that. Chris, Ben, and I got to do something similar a couple weeks ago with all of a look back at the products of 2019, giving our opinions on the high points, the low points of those products, and sort of just an overall impression of 2019 at large. We'll actually be doing something similar next week with a 2020 year-end preview. We're going to look at all the products coming out this forthcoming year, kind of put a hyperbarometer on them, if you will. So that's going to be really exciting. Hope you guys stay tuned for that. Now, it's also the start of a new decade. Incidentally, I've been playing Magic for about 10 years myself now, so that's kind of what was the inspiration for this list. And so what I've done is I've taken a look back at all of the sets from 2010 to 2019 and pulled out the cards that I thought made the most impact on the decade. For good or bad, indifferent, these are the cards that I thought were the most impactful. From my opinion, this is an incredibly biased list, so if you do have your own cards of the decade, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to get a dialogue going on those. I should point out that these are not actually ranked. I simply put them in order of their printing, so as not really to give them saying one card is better than the other, perhaps. So there are 13 of these with an asterisk. Well, there are 13 slides. It's an asterisk 13 slides. Well, you'll understand in a minute. So I thought, it's the easiest thing to start with, just 2010, Jace the Mind Sculptor. The very first 4 ability Planeswalker, broke the mold when it was released in World Wake. If you remember playing back then, there was actually something called the Great Jace Chase. Wizards mailed out pieces of the art to Jace the Mind Sculptor to different outlets, and they had to piece it all together over the coming months until they finally revealed the full picture of Jace the Mind Sculptor, a mind-bogglingly powerful card, and the first Planeswalker ever to be banned in Standard, alongside Stoneforge Mystic just a couple of years later after the printing of Batterskull and sort of War and Peace from New Phyrexia. 4 abilities, a massive 3 loyalty that just goes up immediately to Fate Seal, to Brainstorm, to Unsummon, the back-breaking -12 that just ends the game on the spot. Jace the Mind Sculptor, clearly and unquestionably better than all. Patrick Chapin, the innovator, has a rap song all about Jace the Mind Sculptor. Go check it out on YouTube if you're curious. My favorite Planeswalker of all time. No lie there. Since unbanning in Modern, I've loved getting to play with it finally. And there's clearly no better way to start out a decade of cards than with Jace the Mind Sculptor. Now, transitioning a little bit, moving just a couple of months forward into 2010, Rise of the Eldrazi dropped. And with it came a little enchantment that, again, bias. It's Splinter Twin. 2 red, giving an enchanted creature to allow you to tap that creature and make a copy of that creature that gets haste and then goes away at the end step. But Alex, why is this card good, you might say? Well, at the time, it wasn't good. It didn't really do anything until New Phyrexia came out just about a year later and saw the printing of Deceiver Exarch, giving us the first Exarch Twin standard combo deck. And of course, with Modern later allowing us to play Pestermite, adding Snapcaster Mage to the fold, gave us the truly dominating force of Splinter Twin in Modern. My favorite Modern deck, bar none. Now, of course, Splinter Twin did see its ban just a couple of years ago. Feel personally attacked. It's okay. I've moved on. But this is a card that really sort of set the tone for Modern as a format. Basically, from day one, Splinter Twin won the very first Modern Pro Tour. And just moving forward, it had been, up until its banning, a consistently dominating force. You had to respect the turn 4 Twin, and if you didn't, you were dead. And so I do hope to see this card come back at some point in the future. I highly doubt it will. But for modern sort of like the police of the fun police of the format, keeping everybody in check, Splinter Twin did its job, and I adore this card deeply. My copies are signed by Patrick Diekman. Yeah, no other card has ever just put a smile on my face to just top deck it at the last second possible for an infinite kill win. Absolutely love it. Now, moving forward just a little bit, Rise of the Eldrazi also gave us something else. The Eldrazi, obviously. And of course, we had the Eldrazi Titans revealed for the first time. We'd seen their broods, the little creepy things that were running around kind of messing up Zendikar. But once we got to see Ulamog, Kozilek, and Emrakul, we finally got to see the true power of the Eldrazi. Now, up until Emrakul the Aeon's Torment was printed, the most expensive CMC card was Draco, a 16 Kodos mana 16/16 dragon that, to my knowledge, was pretty trash. But Emrakul the Aeon's Torn really showed us what big mana was capable of when you played it in Magic. It can't be countered. You take an extra turn if you cast it. It's protected from colored spells, from crying out loud. How do you kill this? Annihilator 6? You mean I had to sack 6 permanents before it even hits me? Are you kidding? And you can't kill it either. It always comes back. It goes to the graveyard. It shuffles itself back in. Emrakul just sort of set the stage for just what big mana creatures are in my mind. We even got to see Emrakul the Promised End a couple of years later, and Eldritch Moon, of course, obviously getting banned in that standard format as well. But Emrakul just really kind of represents the precipice of what big mana creatures look like in Magic. I don't think we'll ever see anything quite outdo what Emrakul did. It even birthed, new archetypes, with other cards. We got to see Jeskai Nahiri in Modern, a deck that I really loved playing. It created that deck allowed that deck to exist with Nahiri. We got to see all kinds of crazy mono-green ramp decks in Rise of the Eldrazi Standard. Overgrown Battlements was the card that really channeled this thing out and allowed you to go nuts. Tron decks and Modern, and to an extent Legacy even play this, with things like Show and Tell and Sneak Attack. This card defines absolute power, in my opinion. And to resolve or sneak in and just even attack with an Emrakul just gives you a feeling that is... it's hard to describe, honestly. You have to do it yourself. So Emrakul is an easy pick for my list of for deck cards of the decade. And of course, we had to talk about mana. Mana's important, right, guys? Let's not just discount that fact. And to get to 15 is a pretty absurd number. But just mana in general is a thing that we all have to play with in Magic. And getting a lot of mana quickly is something that some decks excel at. And there's no card on this list, at least, that does that better than Primeval Titan. Yes. 2011 core set 11, actually 2010 core set M11 brought us the Titan cycle, which in their own way all had impacts on the standard format. They all saw different kinds of decks that they all thrived in, but Primeval Titan really has stood the test of time in being, the sort of the poster child of that Titan cycle. The 6/6 trampling giant, when nature calls run, goes and gets 2 lands when it attacks or enters the battlefield, does some truly absurd things. Just look at these modern Titan decks that play this to go and get the bounce lands from Ravnica, to play with an Amulet of Vigor, to untap those automatically, to give it a haste and double strike off a Boros Garrison. Just absolutely blows my mind. No, it's Sunholm, the Guild Forum thing. I can't even think of the name of the land, but it's the one that gives a double strike and haste. Primeval Titan is just the end-all, be-all when it comes to fast mana acceleration, especially in a format like Modern, where you can do this so quickly. I played a little bit with this card when it was in Standard, and I absolutely loved it. It wasn't getting anything crazy, aside from a Vale kit or two, but that's not the point. But a card like this just shows us how dangerous mana acceleration can be. Heck, it's banned in Commander, for crying out loud. Commander. So if it tells you anything, just how powerful this card is, and in terms of mana acceleration and showing off the power of a cycle, is just super, super impressive. And Primeval Titan absolutely deserves its spot on this list. And now we're going to slide the other way in terms of mana acceleration. If you're a more established Magic player, an older Magic player who especially played back in the day, you're familiar with the Power 9 cycle, and within that cycle exists the Moxen and the Black Lotus, of course. And over the years, we've seen variations on those cards. We've seen things like Mox Diamond, Lotus Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond. But in 2011, we got another crack at a Mox Opal, printed with Scars of Mirrodin. This is a 0-drop legendary artifact that added a mana of any color to mana pool. The only catch was you had to have Metalcraft, so it and 2 other artifacts, 3 more artifacts in play to actually get this ability. When I first saw this card, I lost my mind. I was like, free mana? How could they possibly print this card? I had no idea things like Mox Sapphire and Black Lotus even existed at this point when I was playing Magic. But as I got my hands on them, boy howdy did I want to break this. Tezzeret, Agent of Bolus was a deck that I tried to get to work in Standard, and my Moxables were at the heart of that deck. But of course, without things like Artifact Lands or other cheap artifacts, just didn't cut it. So that's why I ported these things over into Legacy, where I played Affinity, my very first Eternal deck, if you will. I know, it's not good. But when I got to play Modern finally, my first Modern deck was Modern Affinity. These were absolutely at the heart of them. And to give us a modern interpretation of cards that are just, they're broken. Let's not bounce around that fact. The Moxen are broken, flat out. And we've seen time and time again Wizards try to tweak and improve the design of the Moxen to give us standard playable ones, modern playable ones. And I think that this is probably the best of the bunch. We've seen more recent versions of cards like this that just don't quite hit the mark. But this one really does show us the real raw power of cheap free mana with a bit of a drawback. So Moxable absolutely had to get a spot on this list. It is perfect. And next up, we're going to go again into sort of this world of Magic numbers, if you will. 0 on our Moxes, our Black Lotuses. 3 for Lightning Bolts and things like that. But there is another number that exists in Magic, and specifically in Modern, the number 7. And of course, you know what I'm talking about. It's Karn Liberated. Because of course, 3 Tron lands, 1 of each, gives you 7 mana. That's a turn 3 Karn. Now, of course, Karn was actually printed just weeks before the Modern format actually broke out and didn't really see play until we actually had a couple of cards banned from Modern. Things like the Cloud Post decks actually had to be hit quite hard before this was sort of the best option for those big mana decks at the time, and still to this day. Like I said, assembling all 3 Tron lands, Power Plant, Mine, and Tower gives you 7 colorless mana, which is a turn 3 Karn. And Karn also has a distinction of being the first colorless Planeswalker, not the last one obviously, but the first one. And just the ability to strip cards out of your opponent's hand, exile target permanents, and then the mind-blowing -14. The most expensive ultimate for a Planeswalker up until his printing, to restart the game and have all exiled permanents under your control as the game restarts. Now, obviously, your opponent scoops at that point, but hey, have you ever done it? Have you ever restarted a game with Karn? It's amazing. So, I hate playing against Tron. I've played Tron in Modern. I played Eldrazi Tron. I know what this card can do, and it's mind-boggling that, as relatively young as Planeswalkers really are in Magic, the fact that Karn just came out and broke so many rules was just absolutely absurd. And I'm sure, obviously it hasn't been the last we're going to see of him, and I'm sure we'll see more Karn in the future, and I can't wait to see what he can do. Karn Liberated, awesome, awesome card. Now, rolling forward just a couple of months after New Phyrexia launched, Wizards gave us Innistrad, the plane of gothic horror, inspired by the old Universal monster tropes: Frankenstein, zombies, werewolves. And within this set was a little blue card, one that I initially dismissed completely. I traded away all copies of it, thinking, "Well, I'll never play this card. I'm not a blue mage. I wanted to keep playing Infect." Yeah. But then I started to wise up. I started to think about blue as a color option. And that's when I turned back to one of my favorite cards of all time, Snapcaster Mage, the little blue mage that can literally do anything. Flash for 2 mana that gives any instant or sorcery in your graveyard flashback until the end of turn. Be it a lightning bolt, a mana leak, a cryptic command. Yeah, now we're getting there. Hell, ancestral visions or recall back in vintage, obviously. Time twisters and time walks. Snapcaster Mage literally can do no wrong. This is actually the last of the invitational cards that was printed up until Tiago Spavarito with Fervent Champion in Throne of Eldraine. But this is Tiago Chan. He actually created this card after winning the invitational. If you're curious about Magic trivia, he actually submitted a land that was a counter spell. Basically, blue, discard this land, counter target spell. Wizards said no, and they got this instead. And Snapcaster Mage has been a dominant force in literally every format. Standard, he saw play in the blue-white control decks, in Jeskai Tempo decks as soon as Return of Ravnica launched. He sees play in Modern and all flavors of control. He sees play in Legacy and Vintage. He completed, well, not complete, but almost completed the cycle of power 2 drops of every color. And to me, he is absolutely perfect. He is, like I said, one of my favorite Magic cards, quite possibly my favorite blue card ever. Sorry, Jace. But yeah, I still own the set that I traded for after getting rid of my original set, but I still own the exact same ones that I've owned for almost a decade now, and I hope I never have to get rid of them. Absolutely adore Snapcaster Mage, and an easy pick for card of the decade. And next up, we have another card from Innistrad, another card that there was a lot of disagreement about when it was first spoiled. My friends were completely convinced it was trash, and I was also thought of the same until I got to play with it finally. I built a mono black deck that had just a single copy of this card in it, and I resolved it and started using it, and was blown away by just how powerful it was. And she sees play in tons of format to this day. It's Liliana of the Vale. The first 3-mana Liliana, there's a great interview with Aaron Forsyth when they were talking about the design of her, and they said, make a 3-mana Liliana. That was the mandate from R&D, and they said, well, she's got to be powerful, and she absolutely is. A symmetrical discard for both players? Scary, right? But no, like, Modern Jund plays this to absolute incredible effect. Tarmogoyf's best friend, obviously. Target player sacrificing a creature, absolutely powerful. I can't count how many times I have cast a Liliana against an unprotected Bogos player in Modern and saw the light die from their eyes. And of course that ultimate, if you've ever fired off a Liliana ultimate, you will know just the agonizing struggle it is to separate your opponent's permanents into 2 piles. But then you are immediately, relieved, and you see the utter horror on their face when they realize they have to make an even harder decision. This is going to be kind of a trend here moving forward in Magic with the 3-mana Planeswalker. We talk about numbers again. 3-mana kind of being the flashpoint for a Planeswalker that might just be too powerful. And we've seen our fair share of them, but I truly think that Liliana was sort of the first one to set that number in stone. And moving forward, we're going to keep seeing, and hopefully they're going to wisen up, but Wizards continues to say that 3-mana is okay for Planeswalkers, and in some cases, it's a little too good. I think that's a good enough reason for Liliana to earn her spot here in our cards of the decade. Now, next up, we've got a cycle of cards. That's why I said when I had 13 slides with an asterisk, this is a cycle of cards we have to talk about here, and a very important cycle at that, because after Innistrad, we returned to Ravnica, the City of Guilds, a beloved Magic set, known for giving us the 2-color identities, the Boros, the Dimir, the Golgari, the Izzet, giving us an identity for all of these color pairings we've been playing with for so long, and really kind of gives a look into the psychographics of Magic players. If they say, well, my favorite guild is Gruul. Okay, cool, why? And they can tell you a little bit about that, and it tells you a little bit about them as well. And of course, nothing more iconic for those guilds than the Shocklands. Now, of course, these are reprints. We saw them originally printed in Ravnica City of Guilds in that block, but to see them come back in both Return to Ravnica and Gatecrash, and then again, technically in Dragon's Maze as a sort of a throw-in to replace the basic land at about the rarity of a mythic rare, if I'm not mistaken. These 10 cards here really defined Standard and Modern once they were reprinted to the point where if you were going to play out of those formats, this is where you started. Your mana base starts with Shocklands, Farseeking and Standard to go and get any of these out of your Jund deck or your Bant deck was absolutely crucial. And the printing of these cannot be understated because I think it really gave Modern the help that it was going to need. Because if you looked at that deck at the time, these cards were pretty expensive, the original printings of them at least, and to see them reprinted just drove their prices back down. It allowed more players to get into Modern and absolutely gave that format the boost that I feel it needed to thrive. And we've seen them printed again in our Return to Ravnica, Guilds of Ravnica block culminating in War of the Spark. These cards are absolutely crucial to any Magic collector's collection. Any deck that you want to play, be it Modern, Standard, Commander, even some Legacy decks. I'll play a couple of these if you're playing like a Death Shadow variant. But we will always see these cards, and that is why I am 100% for them being on this list. Fast forward a little bit from there, and we are on to the plane of heroes, myths, and legends. Gods rule the plane of Theros. We saw Elspeth come back for the first time since last seeing her on Mirrodin as it was taken over by the Phyrexian army. She's here to kill the Hydra. She's here to be killed by Heliod, but now she's coming back in Theros Beyond Death. I wonder what's going to happen there. But the card that truly defined this year for me, and Theros Standard and as well, was a little sorcery. 1 mana, 1 black sorcery. Thoughtseize. Everyone lost their minds when this was reprinted. We hadn't seen this since Lorwyn. This was originally printed in. It's an absolute mainstay in Modern decks at the time. Any black-based mid-range deck in Modern was playing this. Legacy and Vintage playing this as well. But to have this in Standard again, wow, truly unreal. The real fear was that they were going to reprint it again in Theros Beyond Death, and it looks like they're going to avoid it, but we'll see. But Thoughtseize just completely owned Standard as long as while Theros was in legal rotation. The turn 1 Thoughtseize, be it off a Shockland or just a basic, to strip out your opponents, sometimes their own Thoughtseize to protect your turn 2 Pack Rat in the mono black Devotion Mirrors, or in the blue black control decks to strip out their opponent's key cards so you can start setting up counter spells in the future, protect Ashiok in some cases. This card literally defined Standard. And with those Shocklands we just saw, with the cards we're going to get to here in just a minute, the ability to play this in so many decks was absolutely crucial. And to be fair, I would say it went as far as ruining Standard. I'm not going to lie. Thoughtseize into Pack Rat, especially if they had no answer for either, was just a disaster. I almost put Pack Rat on this list, but felt Thoughtseize was just a little bit more impactful for its staying power in all of their formats. This is still obviously a mainstay in Modern, in Death Shadow and Jund decks, and I think it'll continue to see play there as long as it's around. And maybe we'll get a reprint one day. Hopefully it's just in an ancillary product like a Master set, but Standard, I think we are a little bit too good. Now, moving forward just a little bit from there, we're talking about cards that are too good for Standard, enabling all kinds of wacky decks. We have to talk about, you know what they are. It's the Fetchlands, originally printed in Onslaught block. These are the remaining 5 that complete the cycle from Zendikar, giving us the ally colors of Fetchlands printed in Khans of Tarkir. Now, of course, these only went and got basics. That's fine. But it's when they printed in Shadows of Innistrad the next set of dual lands that had basic land types that you could go get with these, created a bit of a problem in Magic for a while. We saw things like Jeskai Black, Abzan Blue. If your deck could play a card, if your deck had, wanted to play a card, let's say Mantis Rider or Siege Runner or anything stupid like that, you could just jam it in there. We saw those four color rally decks that played all manner of colors just to fill their graveyard up and get everything back with a massive rally of the ancestors. I will say that these are too good for Standard. They were even banned in Pioneer from the get-go. Not a single game of Pioneer was played, and Wizards said, these are banned. and I think that was a good idea. You know, talk about Frontier, the format that Harari over in Japan created, started with Magic Origins, and of course included the Fetchlands in that format, basically giving us 4.5, 3.5 color decks dominating that format. And there's a reason nobody plays Frontier anymore. But on the flip side of this, you know, this gave so many players, like the Shocklands before them, this gave so many players access to cards that were absolutely necessary to playing certain formats. Up until these were printed, I was having to rock $100 Scalding Tarns in my Twin and Control decks in Modern, and to finally get the ability to have Flooded Strands and Polluted Deltas to build a wider variety of decks, you know, having my Bloodstained Mires, my Wooded Foothills to build Jund, to finish decks properly, was huge for me as a Magic player, and probably for you as well if you play those formats. Just giving access to more players the cards that are necessary to play formats helps those formats thrive and grow. And that's what we want as Magic players. We don't want to see formats die. We don't want to see Legacy die. You know, that's a discussion for another day to talk about the original dual lands. Will they be reprinted? Who honestly knows? But cards like the Shocklands and the Fetchlands are absolutely necessary to keeping those formats alive. And, you know, the suffering we paid for it in Standard, it's fine. It's fine. It's the eternal impact that these cards will have for all formats that they're legal in. That's what's important. That's what's important. Now, there was another card printed around this time. One that still gives me nightmares. The memes, oh, the memes. It could be none other than Siege Rhino. every con color, Obzon in this case, got a rare that represented their colors, you know, in one form or fashion. I was a fan of Manchester Rider from the get-go. But eventually I came around and saw the light. Siege Rhino was always there waiting for you to gain you a little bit of life, lightning helix your opponent essentially, then trample over your opponent's creatures and just kill them. A turn 3 Siege Rhino into a turn 4 Siege Rhino into a turn 5 Siege Rhino was absolutely backbreaking, and saw enough of that in Standard to make me never want to play the format again. But that's okay. It's incredible. Like, if you can go back and actually look at the sort of design of this card. Originally, it said it couldn't be blocked by tokens. There was a card that created a token for every time that you lost life, and Wizards honestly thought that the existence of the Pain Lands was going to create that card being a problem, and so Siege Rhino was the answer. And you know, it's just one of those cards that it takes on a life of its own. You know, I mentioned the memes. You know, you can go online and just look for Siege Rhino memes, and you'll just see memes ad nauseum. You know, 4 Siege Rhinos on a card. Of course it is. You know, because they always travel in packs. This was a card that absolutely defined con Standard, well into the point where it was no longer played. Heck, this even saw us play in Modern when Birthing Pod, another card that was close to making this list, was actually seeing play. And just, this card's dumb. This card is so dumb. I still own mine just because it's one less Siege Rhino out there that can't hurt you, and for that, you are welcome. All right, now moving on to our last card of the decade, and it's actually the most recent card too. You know, I went through all of the blocks that were printed, all of the sets. I will admit, I did ignore the Commander products and things like that, just because, you know, those cards are kind of unique to their own environments, and so I wasn't sure if I wanted to put those in here with these cards like this. But you know, there are certainly plenty of cards out there. You know, Atraxa is a card that I thought about putting on here. The Mimeoplasm was my entry to Commander, and so it definitely has a special place, more of an honorable mention here in this list as well. But looking at 10 years of Magic cards, it's pretty overwhelming. But as I started to round up this list, there was no card that I felt could be left off for its just cataclysmic impact on a format. Just an indication of, I don't know if they didn't test this thing, thought it wasn't a problem. I just don't know what the hell. What happened with Oko? Oko, Thief of Crowns. My God, when this was first revealed, I thought it was good, I didn't think it was going to be as good as it has been. It's now been banned in Standard. It's been banned in Brawl, even in your deck and as your commander, your general for your Brawl deck. It's been banned in Pioneer now. This card is everywhere. I mean, you can go onto YouTube and watch videos of Luis Scott Vargas playing things like Paradoxical Outcome or survival decks that play Oko in them just because they can. Legacy is seeing the same impact there. True Name Nemesis used to be the killer 3-drop for the different Delver decks, but Oko has supplanted Nemesis as the new Nemesis. In Modern, this is seeing play in Bant Snowblade decks. It's seeing played with Urza in these wacky 5-color Urza decks that just do literally whatever the hell they want. And in Standard, it's been a kind of common trend these last couple of cards to just ruin Standards, but Oko did it. Oko ruined Standard. Every deck was just blue and green. If you weren't playing blue or green, you were fighting against Oko, and to not do either of those things meant you were wrong. And he had to be on this list for that very reason, just to define so many formats so quickly. He's been only legal, was legal for only about 3 months. It's just absurd what this card is capable of. Again, we see that Magic 3 CMC, we see Liliana, we saw Narset, Teferi, Baby Teferi. All of these cards have something in common. It's that 3-mana CMC, the flashpoint for broken Planeswalkers. And Oko, I think, really just has broken the mold and is going to be a very, clear measuring point for all Planeswalkers moving forward for Wizards to go, is this as good as Oko? And if it's getting close, we probably need to scale it back. It's got 2 loyalty abilities, one of which ties into the key mechanic of a format. That right there probably should have tipped us off just how good food was going to be. It's been so long since we've seen a mechanic like food be absolutely imperative. The other thing I can think of last was Investigate with Shadows of our Innistrad, Tireless Tracker being such a powerful card. But here, food just being such a dominating force of Standard and just being the thing that drives Oko crazy. A turn 1 goose into this is just absolutely absurd. I could talk for hours on Oko, honestly. I'm glad I've got my set for Modern. I'll say that much. It's not the only place he's safe right now. But, yeah. So, Oko, everybody. You knew who's going to be here. This isn't actually a surprise. So, there we have it. 13 with an asterisk cards of the decade. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear some of your favorite cards printed this decade. I saw a little bit of conversation on Facebook when I posted this question. Things like Young Pyromancer, Monastery Mentor, Siege Hunter popped up a whole lot. Lots of fans of Mono Blue Devotion out there as well. Elspeth, Sun's Champion, was a big hot card as well. And it's all cards that I've seen, I've played with myself. I've played with all of these cards as well. So it's always cool to see people's different opinions. So let me know down in the comments your cards of the decade. Would love to get that dialogue going. So that is going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for watching. We're coming back this year. I know we've been kind of away for a number of months leading up to last week's episode. But we'll be back to doing deck techs. We'll be back to doing regular content as well. So I hope to see you guys down in the comments, sharing ideas for new upcoming things. Love to get the Discord going. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter once I turn it back on. We'll get there. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope that 2019 is great, not only for Magic, but for you as well. And I hope that we can be back here in 2030 doing this again. Have a great day.